Hello everyone, I am Vaishnavi from Brand Equity. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope all of you are safe in the houses with your family. In an era of every brand which is vying for your attention, you need to take steps to make your brand stand out in the crowd. So that requires strategic transformation of customer care services. And we being in the middle of a modern competitive world, the traditional approaches do not suffice anymore, and that's becoming sort of a common knowledge, and every brand is trying to approach towards that. So organizations therefore must engage customers and prospects across the preferred channels. The need of the hour therefore is a smart and intuitive platform that streamlines efficient routing, whereas it also enables the company to drive seamless operations and quick customer care. In this webinar, Sprinkler will demonstrate how modern customer care can be delivered with the right solution, and how Sprinkle as a platform delivers top-notch customer support with minimal resource cost and maximizing ROI. And to address the same, we have with us Mr. Grad Kohn, Chief Experience and Marketing Officer from Sprinkler. Hello, Grad, welcome.
Thank you. Welcome.
Grad,
good afternoon.
good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm great, actually. It's been a kind of a weird few days in New York City, but I had a nice walk this morning, and everything seems to be under control. So everyone's safe, and so far so good.
I'm so glad to hear that with all the chaos. Thank you for joining us in between this. Uh, Let me do a quick introduction of Grad. Grad leads a team of modern marketers focused on helping the world's most loved brands and to create happy customers. Am I right, Brad? Am I right, Grad?
That's a great way to put it. I love that. Happy customers is what.
Yes. So absolutely. So Grad's an award-winning professional, and before joining Sprinkler, he spent 11 years at Microsoft. And I just want to give a notification. We will be taking questions at the end of the session. Maybe you can drop them off at the chat box. And I will now hand it over to Grad, who will take you to the entire platform. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. I really appreciate that, and thank you for the kind words at the beginning. So what I'm going to do today is going to talk a lot about customer experience, but I'm going to talk about it through the lens of customer care. And for me, it's actually a really interesting time because we do talk about customer experience, and there's this term out there which is customer experience management. We've all kind of heard that, and then a lot of companies talk about that, say that they're a customer experience management company, and that's sort of becoming the new CRM in effect. So as CRM, think of CRM as your transactional relational database, relatively restricted to a small amount of data, and CXM is your unstructured, often unsolicited data about customers, which is all the things that they say about you and the billions of conversations that are going on out there and all the different interactions that they have with your brand. And so my thesis today, and where I'm going to kind of go, is that there's a lot of ways to land a great customer experience. We've all had great customer experiences. We've all had that moment where something happened that just made you fall in love with that brand, or fall in love with that service person, or fall in love with that company. My personal experience, I was telling this to someone the other day, I was flying British Airways a few years ago, and it was my 40th birthday, and it was just for a whole bunch of reasons. My 40th birthday was uncelebrated, and I was all alone, and I was flying economy class from London to Miami, relatively long flight, terrible seat, like a middle seat in economy, and I was maybe a little bit depressed. I wasn't crazy unhappy, but I was a little sad. Let's just put it that way. And I went up to the customer counter, and the gate agent there, ticket agent there, excuse me, she said, welcome, Mr. Kohn. It was British Airways, so she was very nice, very polite, and welcome, Mr. Kohn. Hello, and I was checking in, and I handed her my passport, and she was sort of processing the ticket, and then she looked up at me because she was with she had my, I'm actually Canadian, so she had my Canadian passport, and she sort of looked up at me and she said, "Oh, Mr. Kohn, it's your 40th, it's your birthday." First she saw it was my birthday. She said, "It's your birthday today." And I said, "Yes, it is. Yes, it is." And she said, "And you're flying." I went, yeah, I'm flying on my birthday." And she said, And she went back and she was kind of typing away, doing the ticket, 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 ticket. Then she looked up and I guess she'd done the calculation in her head and she said, today's your 40th birthday. Yep, it's my 40th birthday today. She said, you're flying alone on your 40th birthday. And at this point, I was starting like, all right, I get it. You know? Okay, I'm already a little depressed. You don't need to rub it in. And I said, yes, that is in fact true. I am flying in economy class on a 10-hour flight to Miami on my birthday to go to a conference. And she's like, huh. And she just kind of went back and then she finished and she handed me my ticket. And she said, happy birthday. And I opened it up and it was a first class ticket. And at the time, BA was flying 747, so it was in the upper deck of a 747, and also a pass to the British Airways lounge because I wasn't a BA frequent flyer. And I got to tell you, that was the best birthday I've ever had. You know, it was so amazing because I went from probably the depths of despair and sort of depression to having this amazing experience because I actually never flown first class before at that point in time. Amazing experience, and they were so nice, and the BA cabin crew were fantastic. And when the captain came on to say we'll be landing in Miami in 30 minutes, I actually got sad again because I didn't want to get off the airplane. But that for me, people have different points of view on BA, but for me, I will always love BA because I had this really great customer experience. So that's an example of a great customer experience. So we can all think about other experiences that we've had. So my thesis today is that those types of experiences are very hard for companies to land. That was, a whole confluence of things, right? I had to have my birthday that day. I had to be in that particular situation. There's a whole bunch of things that had to happen. That particular ticket agent had to have enough empowerment to be able to give me a ticket for my 40th birthday. There's a bunch of stuff happening. And to count on those moments to deliver a general customer experience, very, very difficult to do that. Now, there is another way though. And the fact of the matter is that people call for care or support or service, depending on how you want to frame it, all the time, right? And so people are constantly calling for help. And I have called Delta, for who I fly a lot, for help many, 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 many times. That is a moment when you can choose to deliver a great experience or not. And my thesis is that customer care as the gateway to a really great CXM system and the gateway to really great customer experiences. And the first you have to optimize your customer care system before you can think about yourself as delivering great experiences generally. So that's kind of where we're heading, and hope you enjoyed my little story about BA. So I'm going to continue into the deck and I'm going to kind of go through a few things. I'm going to establish a few thoughts about what's happening in the world from a communication standpoint. There's a lot going on in the world right now, but we're going to talk about communication right now. And I'm just going to go through sort of my sort of view of modern channels and sort of how that's influencing the way that people are working. So I'm going to use this word modern channels frequently over the next sort of 20-30 minutes. And I want to just define it for everybody so you understand what I mean when I say modern channels. So if you look at this slide, I've divided the world into traditional channels, which are essentially the channels that were primarily invented in the 20th century. Now, some of these things like newspapers existed before the 20th century, but think of the 20th century as the time where mass media and broadcast media became very dominant. And we got very good at doing mass media. The 21st century, which is the right-hand side of the screen, we call that the modern era, are all the new channels and the new media. What's the difference between these two, right? The difference is that on the left-hand side, traditional media are one-to-many. They're broadcast. I have a message, I'm going to tell you. You don't have the ability to respond to me. You can respond maybe by buying, but you can't actually talk to me. And you don't know who I am. I'm anonymous, and you're essentially anonymous to me as well. So this is the world of broadcast. The modern world is very different. It's two-way. It's conversational. I send you a message, you reply to me, and you expect to be able to reply to me. And you want to know that when you reply to me or when you talk to me, that I talk back to you. It's conversational marketing. It's still extremely new, and most companies are not really fully embracing the potential of conversational marketing, which is how do I have conversations with all my customers? Mark Pritchard, who's the CMO at Procter & Gamble, has a word for this. He calls it mass one-on-one. And I would say that nobody has fully cracked the code on how to really do a great job on mass one-on-one, but in customer care, you're always one-on-one. You always have someone reaching out to you and asking for help. So that is essentially a conversion of your customer care center to modern channels as a way of implementing mass one-on-one. So that's kind of, I'll kind of keep going through that thesis. So what I've got on the right-hand side will be all the social platforms. You're familiar with many of those logos. The messaging platforms, and those are actually probably more important customer care. Things like WhatsApp, WeChat, very, very important. They also allow multimodal communications, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. And there's also other things. There's chat, like on the web, and then there's all things like forums are very, very important. Reddit has become one of the most dominant forums for many of our customers. Also blogs, there are millions of blogs out there. Many of them have conversations going as well. And then review sites, and review sites have got tremendous amount of potential for companies to understand what people think about them. So that's sort of the sort of bifurcated world that we live in. Most companies have done a pretty good job of the traditional world, and they've mostly got that locked down. And we've got, I'd say, relatively sophisticated tools and systems for how to manage broadcast. On the right-hand side, most companies have no idea what to do. and they don't know how to manage it, because the problem on the right-hand side is there are so many channels, and you could choose just to say, I'm going to only do customer service on, say, Twitter, which is super legit. Many people have done that. Twitter is an excellent customer service channel. But what if somebody doesn't use Twitter? What if somebody uses, WhatsApp? What if someone's on Facebook? What if someone made the comment on one of your ads that you're running on LinkedIn? Like, you're just going to ignore those people? I don't think you can. You can't really ignore them. So the challenge most companies have is they run into a situation where they must essentially operate across all these modern channels, of which you can see there's 35 just between messaging and social, and pull in the billions or millions or hundreds of thousands of conversations that are going on about them and be able to understand them. That's a really daunting task, very difficult to do, and that's what Sprinklr does. So that's why Sprinklr works with some of the world's largest organizations to make this happen. So customers have moved to these modern channels. What I would observe, and I've sort of hinted at this a little bit already, is that most organizations have not moved to modern channels because of the difficulties of managing them, which I was talking about a minute ago. But let me talk a little bit about the customer movement. So this is a slide from Mary Meeker. Mary Meeker does the Internet Trends Report. She's been doing it for more than 20 years. It'd be my one mandatory reading for everyone on my team every year. It's a few hundred pages of a PowerPoint deck, but helps you understand everything that's going on in the world of the internet. Now this slide here looks at preferred business contact channels by generational group. And you can see that for the folks who are older, they love the telephone. And there's two things they love about the phone. One is that, it's how they grew up. And number two, it's a synchronous connection. So they like that synchronous one-on-one connection that's very tight. Synchronous connections are really tough for businesses because it's very hard to scale synchronous connections, because while I'm on the phone and you're going to get your wallet, or you're trying to find something, you're trying to remember something, I'm just sitting there the whole time waiting for you. So it's a very unscaled motion. However, it's the way that most customer care is still being done today. It's actually surprising to me, but most customer care is still phone-based. And that's kind of an old-fashioned way of thinking about things. If you look at the other generations, especially the newer generations who are, in their 30s, these are not like people who were just born yesterday. They have a very strong preference for asynchronous communication because they're multitasking themselves, and they've got web chat and social media as their preferred channels, and also email as well. But even Generation X has got a pretty strong preference for those. So companies that ignore this move by customers, I think, ignore it at their own peril, because their customers have moved to a new way of communicating. And if the company doesn't move there, then somebody else probably will, right? So you run the risk of being disintermediated by a new player or by an existing player that decides to do something innovative if you decide to stay with sort of an old-fashioned way of running customer care. So I'll just kind of keep going, but you kind of get my point, I think, on that. So I also say that the people who are under 30 are growing quickly. It's more than half of the planet is now under 30. And so again, I would say I don't know if I would want to ignore or dismiss the preferred communication channel of half the planet. So I always find at this point in a presentation with a company, they either sort of are like nodding their head and getting it, or they're going to be out of business in a few years, and that's just sort of the cold reality of it. One thing that's sort of interesting about this sort of population of sort of under 30s is that they're actually more likely to trust experts who are typically strangers than advertisements. So the mass media approach of sending out a message and expecting people to listen to it is working less well now in this new world, because people want to hear the opinion of others who are not on your payroll about how things are working. And they're obviously massively more likely to be influenced by blogs and social networking sites than their parents were. This is a relatively new cartoon, obviously, because it's in the last couple of months, but this is from the Marketunist, who's one of my favorites. And you know, this is a sort of a fun sort of way of thinking about how the world can change overnight. Satya Nadella actually has this great quote, which is that the world is changing so quickly that he's seen 2 years worth of digital transformation in the last 2 months. And so you never know when there's going to be a black swan event that'll cause things to change very quickly. So my advice to everyone always be pushing on the innovation curve, because you don't know when you're going to need it. And if you are pushing hard and going fast, you're less likely to need it. All right, so customer care. Let's sort of switch gears a little bit to customer care and talk about that. So this, I think, is a very interesting stat, which is the majority of our millennials report that they stopped doing business with the brand due to poor customer service experience. It's an amazing number, right? Think about that. 2/3 of the people who have a bad experience in customer care, and bad experiences in customer care are pretty common. They just stop doing business with that company. You've lost that customer. And remember, the people that are calling your customer care are actually already customers. We tend to devalue them for some reason. We always spend more money on the new customers, but your existing customers are your most valuable asset. It costs 7 times as much to get a new customer as it does to keep an existing customer. So making people angry doesn't make any sense. Most people expect companies to interact with them across these modern channels without delay. And without delay means like within 5 minutes. And how many of you are getting back to every DM on Twitter, or every post on Facebook, or every message on WhatsApp in 5 minutes? If you are, congratulations, excellent. Keep that going. And if you're not, you've got a lot of work to do. This is like 42% expect responses within an hour, right? There's actually a really great study showing that after an hour, people start to dismiss it, and they actually devalue the brand significantly. And within an hour, they're willing to pay a premium. If within 5 minutes, they're willing to pay a significant premium to the brand because they like the response rate. And this is my favorite number, which is, you know, most customers who don't complain, when they're unhappy, they just leave. They just stop buying your product. So you're not going to have a chance to fix it. They have a bad experience, and they're not going to do business with you. They won't say anything. You'll never see them again, and you'll never get them back again. So customer care becomes the new marketing. So care is the new marketing. I think an interesting concept, which is, how does care operate as a marketing motion, and how does care operate as a marketing motion both in retaining existing customers, but also upselling existing customers and getting them to do more with you. You've got them on the phone, you've potentially solved a big problem for them. Wouldn't it be great to offer them something else that would also be helpful to them at that time? And they're more likely to be able to purchase because they're like, hey, I just had a great experience. I really love this brand. This brand's doing a good job for me. I'm going to double down on this brand and spend more with it. So this is really probably what could be one of our primary marketing channels. What's interesting is that care rarely reports into marketing, and care is rarely run by marketers. And in fact, most of the care metrics are things like NPS and time on call because of the phone, and they don't think about how to turn it into a revenue channel. So the challenge I would throw out to anyone listening is, how do you make care a revenue channel? Because most people are willing to pay more for a great customer experience. This is an amazing number. 86% of people are willing to pay more for great customer experiences. So customer experience becomes a big part of your brand and a big part of how you drive value. And this is the percent of customers who spend more following a positive customer experience, both in B2B and B2C. So you see, these are huge numbers. If you think about what you're trying to do in terms of increasing revenue, these are massive numbers that allow you to change your revenue curve in a really interesting way. And if increasing your customer retention rate is important, you should be, then this is why, right? So your customer retention rate can increase profit from 25 to 95%. And the reason for that is because it's so expensive to get new customers. So the more you can retain your existing customers and reduce your churn, the more profit you'll have as a company. And particularly in a world of subscription and SaaS, which is where we are today, this has become more important than ever. So let me talk a little, this is kind of a bit of a model of kind of customer service and customer care and sort of how it works. Let me sort of walk through this a little bit. So this is kind of a traditional model. You've got, you know, kind of the customer service, and it's interacting with customers, and we sort of think of it in a sort of single mode model. But in fact, you know, there's all sorts of other things that are happening, right? People are calling in not just for service, but they've got billing issues, or they've got product questions, or they've got ideas and feedback for the company. And I'd say that in a model where you just think about customer care as just solving problems, you don't think of it as a marketing motion, you will ignore things like product questions and ideas and feedback. And what we've actually found is about 30% of the time, you actually 30% of the time you actually find that people are calling customer care not to complain, but to actually ask about products. And if customer care is not organized as a marketing motion, those product questions are redirected and lost. If customer care is configured correctly, then those product questions can be answered and a sale can happen right away. So remember, half your current customers are your next customers. You're always selling to your existing customer base, and customer care is a key way to do that. So I've made a couple of these comments already, but I want to just kind of put a pin in it on this slide and just make an important point about sort of what the difference is between modern channels and sort of the old-fashioned sort of phone channel. So synchronous means one-to-one tight connection. That's the old way. Asynchronous means I can do a bunch of different things at the same time, is modern. The great thing about asynchronous is that an agent can now handle multiple calls at the same time. And it's much more fun for the agent, and customers are able to kind of respond in the way that they need to respond. The other thing is that single channel is an approach that many people have taken in customer care. I'm just going to handle, you have to call me, or you have to do this one thing to get a hold of me, or I'll just take an email, right? A much more powerful way to do it is omni-channel, which is you can reach out to me any way you want, and I'll hear you, and I'll see you, and I'll get back to you. Super powerful idea because it leaves everyone on the platform they prefer to be on. And the final thing, and this is for me one of the most compelling points, is that when you're dealing with particularly email and or phone, you're very much in a single modality, right? So it's like, especially on the phone, you're just talking, you just have your voice. What's powerful about something like WhatsApp is I can start with a text, and then, you know, at some point, send me the picture of the problem. Great, you know, I'm not sure I'm learning enough from that picture. Can you do a video, like just show me the edges of it? So video, oh great, you know, bump, 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 back and forth. You know what? I really need, can we just talk? Let's just jump on a voice call really quick. Okay, great. Okay, I'm gonna confirm some stuff. Great, get through that really quick. Great, back to text, maybe back to picture. You know, one more phone call. So you can go back and forth inside these messaging platforms in a way that you can't do in other channels because they're single mode. And so that to me is much more human. You know, as humans, we tend to like to do different things. Use your hands, use your voice, use your eyes. You know, you show pictures. You know, we tend to use a lot of different ways to communicate and be able to get our point across. And the messaging platforms do a great job of allowing people to get their point across. Great quote here from McKinsey & Company as well, which is, you know, people want to have multiple channels and they want to engage with companies across all the channels that they prefer to work on. So let me talk a little bit about Sprinklr. I'm going to switch gears a tiny bit. So how do you make all this happen, right? So I think it's kind of fine and good to say, you know, you should be doing customer care as your primary customer experience motion. Care should be your new marketing. Wow, it sounds great, right? Well, how do I do that? And so Sprinklr's been built from the ground up to make this happen. So if you look at this layer cake that I have in front of you here, the bottom layer is sort of our connectivity layer. So we're connected to all of the modern channels. This is kind of Sprinklr's bread and butter, which is something we've done from day one. And then we have a database of all the interactions that are occurring with you and your organization across all those channels. So anything that's legally available and anything that's public is what we're pulling in. So when people post things publicly, and if it's, you know, legal for us to pull it in, we will. And then we have the third layer is all the common functionality that we built in Sprinklr that all our different products leverage. And then the fourth layer is a very important layer, which is privacy is extremely important. There's a lot of PII, and there's a lot of rules around GDPR and the California Privacy Act. And so we are a privacy first company. We are extremely diligent on making sure all that PII is protected. We are only accessing public data anyway, and we're only accessing stuff that's legally available anyway. But on top of that, we've created a whole bunch of layers of privacy. One of the reasons for that is that many of our customers are some of the world's largest organizations, like banks, for example. And the banks, for them, the privacy stuff is super critical, and they wouldn't work with a vendor that didn't have that. So, we've been fortunate to work with large organizations who, essentially have mandated and push us to have the world's, kind of world-class levels of privacy and security in the platform. And then on top of that, there are sort of 5 applications that Sprinklr runs. The one I'm talking about today is what we call Modern Care, and essentially it helps reduce churn by enhancing customer experiences. It helps reduce costs by being more operationally efficient. You can handle multiple calls at the same time, and it increases customer satisfaction by making the quality of the interaction much higher, partly by interacting with customers where they prefer to be, and partly by making sure the agents have a better AI-enabled way of interacting with customers, so that the conversations and ideas of the best agents are shared with all the agents. So that's sort of Sprinklr at a glance. This is what we call our care value framework. And so at Sprinklr, it's very important that when we work with an organization, that organization is getting value from their use of Sprinklr. And so we sort of identify value with the company and identify the positive business outcomes they want. So think everyone wants to, make more money, so increase revenue. They want to reduce their costs, on an ongoing basis, and everyone wants to manage risks. So those are kind of the 3 core positive business outcomes. But underneath each of those outcomes, there's a set of use cases, and we've kind of pulled those use cases from the thousands of customers we've had over the years, and we look at the primary use cases that people have used to achieve those business objectives, set up a set of KPIs, and then we sort of show how the value is realized. What's unique about Sprinklr is that we start from the day one. The discussion starts with this framework. Then when we implement according to the framework that the customer has said they're interested in, and then that customer gets a dashboard in the platform showing how Sprinklr is performing against the KPIs they've identified. So there's a string that kind of pulls itself right through Sprinklr from beginning to end that shows how people are doing on the value that they're buying. So for me, it's one of my favorite things about Sprinklr, because you always know what you're getting out of it. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but this is actually on our website, which is Sprinklr.com, and it just goes through sort of the different positive business outcomes, which are the blue boxes on the left. And then in this case, there are 9 use cases in care that drive those PBOs. And so these use cases, and they're lined up against the business objective that they support, are the things that we have found customers use Sprinklr for in order to be able to get lower churn, lower costs, and increased customer satisfaction and care. These are, each one in order, and I'm just going to touch on these kind of really quick. In terms of reducing churn, which is critical, and I think reducing churn is the thing that really is key to increasing your revenue. Remember the slide I had about profit? This is how you're going to drive your profits. So getting consistent support, getting AI-driven predictors of customer satisfaction, and driving upsells are a really big part of how churn is reduced. In terms of reducing costs, using AI to deflect simple questions so agents aren't bothered with sort of silly questions. One of my favorite examples is at Microsoft, where I used to work. Microsoft has a support channel for Xbox. And so the question that every Xbox agent is taught to ask first is, because someone will call and they'll say, hey, the DVD won't load, or I'm not getting a picture, or I can't connect my connector. So the first question the agent's trained to ask is, have you turned on your Xbox? And 30% of the time, people go, oh, thank you. That's a complete waste of time for both the customer and the agent. The agent, that's frustrating, because the agent's like, that's not a very helpful call. It's not very intellectually stimulating. And obviously for the customer, they wasted a bunch of time waiting for an agent, and all they had to do was turn on their Xbox. So now a bot can do that and say, before we talk sending to an agent, could you please check to make sure your Xbox is on? And immediately 30% of the calls disappear. You also have automated workflows that sort of creates a lot of operational efficiency and a lot of repetition in terms of doing things the right way. And then communities allow people to self-serve. Then finally, increasing CSAT, we can actually keep more of our agents and have agents who are having a happier time, and happy agents lead to happy customers. We can monitor and audit conversations to make sure things are going well and the quality of the conversation is high. And then we can also have early warning and detection on any kind of escalation that may be going on that management needs to understand and intercede on. So this is kind of the modern care journey. And as you think about building out a modern care system, this is a great sort of guideline. So the four sort of steps here are listen, route, resolve, and measure. And listen is, you've got to hear everything that's being said about you across all the modern channels. And it's not sufficient just to listen to things that are sent directly to you. The app mentions are great. You obviously have to monitor those, but that's not really listening. That's just monitoring. Listening is people talking about you without necessarily mentioning you or maybe spelling your name even incorrectly. You got to pull all that in. Then once you've pulled that in, you have to be able to route it correctly. So identify the messages and get it to the right customer care agents. Nike, for example, does an amazing job of routing stuff to agents who play the sport that someone may be having a problem with. So let's say I have a problem with my Nike golf shoes. I'll likely talk to a customer care agent who plays golf. So that's extremely powerful. So when I'm having that conversation, I don't need to explain issues around golf to that person. They get it, and they can help me really, really fast. And that's where resolve comes in. So in the resolve, I want to be able to communicate with the customer and then do any kind of escalation or follow-up, and then be able to measure and report to management on how things are going. So this is a really great way to think about how modern care should work. And the key, obviously, is to get listening going and then get a platform in place like Sprinklr that allows you to route, resolve, and measure all those conversations that are coming in. I'm not going to go through this in a ton of detail, but you may want to sort of look at this later. This is something that we do as we work with customers, as we have architectural diagrams. We do a lot of work to make sure that people think through kind of how everything's put together. And again, these are the modern channels on the left, and kind of coming into the system and working through the system to make sure that you are delivering exceptional world-class experiences through customer care. And that's it. I'm going to leave you with a call to action, which is if you go to sprinklr.com/modern care buyer's guide, a lot of the stuff I showed you today is in there. It's a very detailed way of thinking about how to create and build a modern care system. And if you would like to contact me or talk to me directly, you can DM me on Twitter. Or you can hit me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn profile is there. But I'll also say, to kind of stay in keeping with my thesis, I am GradCon everywhere. I'm the only GradCon in the world, which is kind of fun. So you can sort of hit me anywhere you want. I'm GradCon on all the platforms out there, and feel free to come at me on TikTok or come at me on Instagram or Facebook or wherever you want. So I'm happy to interact with you on the channel of your preference. Because I want to deliver a great customer experience for you as well. And with that, I'll take some questions and go back and forth and have some conversation. Thanks for your time and attention.
Welcome back. So I really enjoyed your session. I would like to say I really enjoyed the story of your first class travel.
Me too.
I haven't had the experience, but maybe when I do, I'll be able to tell a similar one though. Brad, in keeping with the
I've actually had a
changing
number
times.
of friends, by the way. I've had a number of friends who, I've told this story a number of times, obviously, in my circle. And I've had a number of friends who deliberately flown on their 40th birthday on economy class just to see if it would happen to them. And so far, none of them had the experience. So they all ended up flying economy class on their birthday. So it's, you have to get the right agent. It may have just been that moment. So.
Yeah. If I can take one of the sentences that you always say, happy customers are repeat customers, right? So
Yeah.
in a pandemic like this, let's address the pandemic, right? So in a pandemic like this, how do you keep the customers engaged, and where does modern care come in, and how do you utilize that in times like these?
That's an excellent question. And I think let me address it not from the standpoint of pandemic, but let me address it from the standpoint of changed customer behavior. Okay, because I don't want to get into there's a lot of mental health and healthcare aspects of the pandemic that I don't feel really qualified to talk about. But what I can talk about is I can talk about customer care change and customer behavior change and how that affects customer care. For example, um, people are doing a lot more ordering online. I heard an amazing stat yesterday, I believe, that it was yesterday, before the pandemic, online grocery shopping, and this is a UK stat, online grocery shopping in the UK had reached 7% of sales. It's pretty good. And even, it's funny, online shopping is only 7 to 10% even in the US. There's still lots of e-commerce opportunity out there, right? They just got some numbers in a couple days ago, and UK online grocery shopping is now 15%. So the business doubled in 12 weeks. So the doubling anything in 12 weeks is really hard, right? There's distribution systems, they don't scale that fast, right? Distribution systems are stretched, customer care systems are stretched, like everything gets stretched. And what's been happening to us, which has been interesting, is we've had more inquiries and more action from customers on customer care than anything else over the last 3 months, because these customer care systems are suddenly being pushed. And what we're finding is that a lot of companies are now finally making the change to modern care because it's the only way to scale that quickly. Because I can't double the number of people on telephones. I don't have the margin for it. But I'm getting twice the phone calls. But if I move to modern care, I can actually handle twice the calls with maybe 25% more agents or maybe 15% more agents, because they can do a bunch of things at the same time. And so this move to modern care, I think, is being accelerated by that sort of behavior change. I think the other thing is that, as people are spending more time online, people are getting better. I think people are getting educated. I was shocked, I will say, in the very early days of this, because I do a lot of Zooms with friends, and our family owns a winery in California. And so they started doing wine tastings on the weekend. It was kind of fun family thing to do. I have a bunch of friends that we used to go out with. And so we all get together on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and my brother and sister and I all get together Wednesday night. Today, for example, we'll be getting together and just chat for a while. And I have been surprised at how many people didn't know how to use video conferencing software. So everyone knows how to use that now, right? Everyone's been coached up and trained, and everyone's pretty good at it now. So there's been a lot of computer literacy that's been driven in the last 12 weeks that we didn't have before. That's going to create new expectations around customer experiences, and I'm going to have a new expectation of what I want to see. Plus, I'm having a lot of new experiences online, and inevitably, I'm having some really good ones. And so those really good experiences, the problem a little bit sometimes with customers is once you have a good experience in one place, you expect to have that good experience in all places, and you don't differentiate between the categories. For example, if I use Uber and I or Grab or something like that, if I now I know, say Grab tells me where my car is at any point in time and how long I should expect to wait for the car to arrive, right? That's kind of, we all know that now. Well, why can't everybody tell me where my product is and where it is in the delivery? Like, shouldn't everyone be able to tell me that? And many companies, like Domino's Pizza in the US, for example, has actually done that. Now you see when the pizza is going in the oven, when the pizza is coming out of the oven, when the pizza is going in the box, when the pizza is going in the cart, like you can see all those steps because that's what customers expect. And so rising customer expectations, I think, are going to be an outcome of the last 12 weeks as people have done more online. There's going to be more pressure online, so people are going to have to move more rapidly to modern channels. And just generally, I think the world's changing in really interesting ways. But these kind of black swan events, they occur kind of out of the blue, which is, I made a comment really quickly when I was talking, which was always be innovating because you don't know when you're going to need it. And while it may not seem urgent today, I mean, how many of us could have predicted the pandemic just maybe 4 or 5 months ago? It was very hard to see. And so when something comes up on you, if you've been in an ongoing state of innovation and change, you're going to be more prepared than if you just wait for change to come to you.
I have to ask you this. Do you take some of the social interactions and any learnings from it that you applied back into the platform? Do you have a pattern that you recognize and then maybe take the feedback and put it back into the platform or your products? If you've done anything like this, could you throw some light on it?
Hmm. Right. That's another excellent question, by the way. Um, so we've been in business for 10 years. The first 2 years we were just building, we were just coding. I was actually Sprinklr's first customer when I was at Microsoft, so I've been with Sprinklr for a really long time. And what Sprinklr's done very, very well, I think, is that it only builds features that customers want to pay for. A mistake a lot of software companies make is they build features that they think customers want, but they don't necessarily know, and then they launch it and half the features get used. Great. Half the features don't get used. Oh, that's a real waste of engineering resources, right? And so Sprinklr's always done an amazing job of being very focused on using only building features people are willing to pay for. So I paid for a bunch of stuff and got it. And so that's sort of the first part of the customer feedback. The second thing is as we build products, we always start with a definition partner, and that partner provides feedback in terms of how we're working and how the product is working. Then we go to limited availability, and then we have a broader set of customers, more feedback comes in, and we're constantly improving and changing as a result of that, and then general availability. And even once we go to general availability, there's still feedback coming in all the time. We have very, very large customers who have very large user bases. So we have 100,000 people kind of banging on the application all the time, giving us feedback, and we're always making changes. So Sprinklr has a release cycle where every week we do something, there's some kind of release. Every month there's something sort of quasi-major, and every quarter we do a major release. And all these releases are usually based on customer feedback, customer requests, and those are obviously always prioritized. The other thing is we also do spend a fair amount of time understanding the landscape. So I would say we probably didn't have a lot of customer requests for GDPR functionality, but we knew GDPR was coming. Oddly, many people seemed surprised by it, but it was a pretty clear date for a long time. Just like every year, people seem surprised by the holidays. And so as we knew GDPR was coming, we started building all the GDPR functionality. And when it went live, which I think was like April 2018, we were there that day. We went live with our GDPR functionality as GDPR went live. And that was really cool. That was like, our customers thought that was really awesome. So a little bit of what customers count on from us is thought leadership to be able to stay ahead of the curve and keep them sort of safe. As the California Privacy Act has come into place, we've obviously been right on top of that, and we spend a lot of time there as well. And then the final thing is we work very closely with all the platforms that we support. They're extremely important to us, and they have a constantly changing rules. And so a number of platforms like Facebook and Twitter and others made a number of changes over the last year and a half around privacy and access and stuff like that. And they would talk to us first and take us through what they were thinking. And we would be able to give them feedback, which is really neat. And then we would also be able to start adjusting it. So when those changes would occur in the platforms, our customers immediately had the new functionality in Sprinklr, like that morning. So there wasn't any delay there. And so we always were able to stay pace of all those changes. And I think, again, our customers count on us for sort of that kind of leadership to make sure that we're always up to date with everything that's going on.
That's interesting. But Grad, if I would request you, like in a minute, if you can tell me how automation helps improve productivity, because I want everyone to hear that again and again, and that would serve the purpose of you using AI, right, and IVR also.
Sure. I'll do AI and IVR a little bit differently because they're slightly separate issues. But but let me talk about AI first. So quickly on AI, AI is, I think, reasonably well misunderstood. There's a great set of AI webinars actually that we've done at Sprinklr. You can just get them off our site. That's a 6-part series. It does a really good job of explaining what's going on. I'm a big fan and proponent of it because AI is really good for anything a human can do in less than a second, right? So, and anything a human can do in less than a second, that's drudgery. Like I'm a big fan of releasing humans from drudgery of repetitive tasks. And when you can release people from drudgery, like all the people telling people to turn their Xbox on, for example, then you allow humans to actually do much more interesting work and a much higher level work. And so that's really what personally is a passion of mine. Now, what's cool about Sprinklr is that we have the world's largest database of customer interactions. We have billions of conversations. And I'm sort of 16 petabyte database that's like a real-time database. So we have a huge training set that we can use to make sure that our AI has the most knowledge about how people interact. And then because we have a large customer base and a lot of customers using it, we have a lot of training going on. People, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, in terms of the replies. And so the combination of training and data set makes our AI probably one of the world's most sophisticated AI platforms. And one of the way we use it is we'll do things like, if I'm an agent, the AI will give me suggestions on how to reply to a customer question. So a customer will say, hey, why is it red and not blue? And I can make it up, which is fine. Agents are very capable of doing that. But isn't it nice to have 3 suggestions below that the AI is like, hey, based on the question the customer just asked you, just kind of some suggestions on how you might want to answer that. And then the AI is doing 2 things. One, it's understanding the customer's question. Number 2, it's pulling from the database of answers. And number 3, it's actually looking at the answers that the best agents have used. So like I'm getting like a whole bunch of knowledge. And I may or may not use one of those suggestions as an agent. I have the choice. Or I may just edit one of them. Oh, that's really good. What a great idea. I love the way they put that. I'm just going to make a little change. Okay, perfect, and boom. Now I've done it way faster. I've got a higher quality reply, and I have a better interaction with the customer. And so what happens as an agent is the customer will start to be more positive. Oh, thank you. That was really helpful. I really appreciate that. Well, you're welcome. And as human beings, I think ultimately we always seek to have positive interactions with each other. We don't want to have negative interactions. And so if you can get to a positive place really quickly, the agent feels good. I helped somebody, and now I can maybe help them more by offering them another product. And the customer's like, oh, that was really helpful. It's fast. It was really thorough. And so this is where AI can actually sort of help lubricate the human experience in a way that makes us work together better.
So, what do you say, Grad? Let's take some questions.
That sounds great.
Perfect. So I'll shoot you one question. It asks, how can one market good customer care and include that in their customer acquisition strategy?
Okay, well, that's a really interesting question. Huh. How could you market customer care? Yeah, that's really, what a great question that is. It's so interesting because I'm mostly focused, and most companies are focused on just getting their customer care to sort of work. But you're right. If you did a really good job on customer care, like if it became something that was a source of true competitive advantage, you could actually advertise that we are the world's best customer care at whatever industry you're in, and challenge people to call customer care. And wouldn't that be a very interesting source of competitive advantage? I'm pretty sure I've never seen anybody do that. I'd love examples of where someone has done that because I think it'd be amazing. I'm pretty sure I've never seen that, but that is probably something we will see in the next few years as people start to develop a customer care approach that's world class. One company that does a really, really fantastic job of this, and they're a Sprinklr customer, but they're wonderful, is Airtel. They do some really great stuff, and I think Airtel's probably not too far from being able to advertise their customer care as a source of why you'd want to go with them. So we'll look to see where that goes. Great question. Thank you.
So there's one more question from Sanjay. How do you manage customer experience in B2B markets? And he's also requested if you could share some best use cases.
Yeah, so B2B, B2C, you often get that question, and so let me talk a little bit about that for a second. I mean, there are obvious differences in B2B versus B2C, difference in basket size, difference in the approval levels, difference in the time it takes to close a deal and things like that. But at the end of the day, you're still selling to a person. And in B2B, I think a lot of times people forget that there's a human on the other end, and that human is an emotional being. And so I'm always sort of just reinforcing that at the end of the day, it's really human to human, not B2B or B2C. And so in B2B, I think that customer support can be a source of huge competitive advantage, because you can enable people to use the application better, and you can enable people to get more out of the application and learn more about it. And I think classically in software, most people are underusing the software. And so what we do at Sprinklr, so we obviously use Sprinklr for customer care, and we've had tremendous results in terms of reducing our costs and increasing customer satisfaction, like 70% reductions and 90% increases. It's been a tremendous story. And so if you kind of take that approach, what we find is that customers will call with an issue but they'll leave with training, or they'll leave with understanding, or they'll leave with an excitement about buying another part of the product that can help sort of solve their problem. So I don't look at them that differently, but you do need to make sure that your B2B agents are deeply skilled in the platform that they're using. One thing I will say is that I've noticed this a little bit, is that a number of care groups don't necessarily use the product that they're doing the care for. And I think that's really important, that the care team is deeply embedded in using the product itself to really understand it well. And so make sure that you're drinking your own champagne as you're servicing people in the B2B space.
Okay, so Anju has a question. What are care KPIs and how is it different from regular engagement KPIs?
So classically, care KPIs focus on customer satisfaction. So Net Promoter Score would be an example of that. And they focus on the cost. So how long does it take to service a customer, what they call time on call, TOC. And I think those metrics are dangerous because agents work hard to get people off the phone as quickly as possible. And but with some study, they are trying to satisfy the problem, but it's like, get that call finished quick. That's sort of the way they're working it. I think that in more sophisticated customer care departments, and a lot of our customers, Dell's a great example. They use Sprinklr for customer care globally. They look at things like upsell. How much revenue can an agent generate? They look at things like, they still look at customer satisfaction, obviously. They look at sort of things like reduced number of returns, right? Because the returns are very expensive. And so you can start to, and they look at churn and customer retention. And so if you think of customer care as a new marketing, you start to actually apply marketing metrics to the KPIs and start to do it that way. It does require tight coordination between the leader of customer care and the leader of marketing, or it requires the customer care and move under marketing.
Okay. So one question here. Given the audience across age groups are moving to online platforms, how do you see niche brands progressing in terms of quality of communication with the targeted set of audience?
Would you mind repeating that question? I want to make sure I don't think I fully got that.
Yes.
Say it correctly. Say that again. Sorry.
So with audience across age groups which are moving to online platforms,
Yeah,
how do you
okay.
see niche brands progressing in terms of quality of communication with the audience?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if I'm going to answer that question correctly, but let me try my best. Okay, so niche brands. So there's a very interesting thing going on right now in the world, which is the barriers to entry of becoming a product company are dropping very rapidly. And so we have some very large customers, particularly in the packaged goods space, where they have what they call black swan events, where out of nowhere, a very small company gets a great idea and just explodes, and they don't even see it coming, right? And what you'll see typically is that these companies are using modern channels. These disruptive small companies use modern channels. We had a major clothing manufacturer, and the head of that, a very famous person, the head of that was in our offices, and they were talking about Kylie Jenner. And Kylie Jenner went from 0 to $1 billion company practically overnight, and just using modern channels, right? And they're like, they said, we've got this infrastructure, right? We've got stores, and we've got to do fashion shows, and we do TV advertising and magazine advertising, and all these people and costs and structure, and we're kind of trundling along and making this happen. And meanwhile, Kylie Jenner kind of comes out of the blue, does a bunch of stuff on Facebook, and she's $1 billion company overnight. And they're like, we're really scared about that, right? And so what I've noticed is all the niche brands are, I think I might call them, niche may not be a bad word. I don't know if niche is quite the right word, but like these smaller, sort of more nimble modern businesses, they're using modern channels as a way of connecting with their customers in ways that traditional companies don't. And they can maneuver around a traditional company very interestingly. And I think they create more trust, because what they'll do is they'll start to create community around their product, and they create a lot of recommendation around their product. Whereas the big companies are just doing, say, broadcast advertising on TV that doesn't drive community, doesn't drive connection, and it doesn't drive word of mouth. And so I'm very optimistic that over time what's going to happen is you're going to see a lot of very small companies be able to carve out really interesting spots in the sort of product spectrum for themselves and be able to have really nice businesses and be able to do that by creating community around their product. And we'll have more and more communities. And I suspect you'll see fewer and fewer mass brands over time and more custom brands where, you know, I'll have my favorite brand and you'll have your favorite brand, and they both have enough scale to be, and with custom manufacturing being more localized, they'll both have enough scale to be legitimate businesses, and we can feel very unique. The thing that makes humans special, I mean, I've never talked to a tiger, so I don't know if a tiger would feel this way or not, but I think the thing that makes humans special is we are very, 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 very proud of our individuality. And humans may say that they like to be part of this or that, but just take a look around. Everyone's dressed differently. Stand on a street corner. Every car is different. Even the two cars that are like the same car, they're a little different. Different hubcaps or different steering wheel or different decoration or different color or whatever. Almost nothing is the same. You know, all of us, you know, this is my pencil I'm holding right now. All of us are using different pens and pencils. Like every single person on this webinar, guaranteed, is using a different pen or pencil, right? Like everyone's chimney looks different. You know, everything is different. And we all, this individuality is what drives humanity. And so I think in a world of modern channels where we can have individual connections, what can be very, very cool is that we'll all have essentially our own brands. And that trend will just continue. And we've got 100 years of that playing itself out, so it's not going to happen tomorrow. But I think modern channels will be the way that that sort of happens. So, oh, that's kind of a long answer to your question. It was kind of an interesting question. Sorry.
But that was an interesting answer. I really like how you base your use cases on things that you have experienced, right? First class journey, and then Kylie Jenner, now that she's back in news. So yeah, that was an interesting one.
Yeah, and then there's like, you know, like Dollar Shave Club's another great example. Dollar Shave Club is a brand that's very big in the US. It started essentially with a YouTube ad, right? And kind of
Mm.
an innovative ad. It's kind of a very interesting ad, and a very compelling proposition, which is very inexpensive shaving equipment that is high quality, delivered to your house every month. And they did it in a very much don't overpay and kind of an anti-big brand sort of approach. And they themselves have now become a very big brand, right? And so in Gillette, which is a product owned by Procter and Gamble, they didn't see it coming. Like Dollar Shave Club
Mm.
came out of nowhere and just
Mm.
boom, overnight took a bunch of market share. And that kind of thing is going to continue happening. And so larger brands are trying to figure out how to respond to that. And every day new entrepreneurs are being created. I would say another sort of interesting outcome of the pandemic is that I suspect that this will accelerate that motion because a lot of people have been sitting at home thinking about what they want to do with their lives. It's a little bit of introspection, and people kind of like working from home, kind of like the freedom. I want to do something on my own. Also, there have been a number of people who've been laid off, right? So companies like, say, Airbnb laid off 25% of its employees. Now, to get a job at Airbnb is extremely difficult. Airbnb is like the Harvard of online companies. So they laid off 25% of like the best marketers on the planet in the online world. But what are they doing right now? Well, some of them will find new jobs, right? But I'm guaranteeing you that a bunch of those people have started new companies, right? And they've got an idea and they've started a new company and they're doing something right now. And so all of this sort of human potential that's being released as companies sort of lay off and change their cost structure, that's not just going to go to waste. Those people are all driving against an idea. They're all going to make something happen. And so look for a lot of the stuff. Like a year from now, I think we'll be seeing a lot of these sort of new brands and new ideas coming out of nowhere.
Okay. So Brad, I think we'll take one last question. You okay with that? And then we can just do the
Absolutely, no
closing
problem.
remarks.
Right on time.
All
It's
right.
great.
Perfect. So I think this question is in line with what you were saying. So I think we should address it. It's from Arvind, and he asks, as a brand strategist, how will you calibrate the brand identity in keeping with enhancing customer experience?
It's an interesting question. Calibrate the brand identity and keeping with customer experience. Well, so let me sort of answer it this way. So I would argue that a brand. So what is a brand? Right? That's kind of a little bit of that's a big question. And there's an amazing video. It's on YouTube called "What is a Brand?" And I would recommend that anyone who's interested in marketing or advertising should watch this. It's an older video. It was made in the 70s, but the principles in it are as true today as they were then. And it was from J. Walter Thompson, which is a large advertising agency. It's their UK leads, which Jeremy Bulmer, who's a famous advertising person still around, and Stephen King, not that Stephen King, a different Stephen King. Jeremy and Stephen lead a conversation on what is a brand. And part of like what a brand is essentially a collection of the experiences that you have with it. At Procter & Gamble, they talk about the first moment of truth being when you're standing in the aisle to think about what you're going to buy. And the second moment of truth being when you use it, when you have an experience with the brand. And then Google has added this new idea called zero moment of truth, which is the research you do on the brand where people talk about the experience they had with it, right? But that sort of spectrum of zero, first, and second moment of truth is a set of experiences that you're having with the brand. And that is what sort of creates the brand identity in your mind. Now, one of my favorite examples, and I can say this because I've got great affection for Microsoft. I worked there for a long time, and I love that company so much. But if you think about the brand name Microsoft, it's the word microcomputer and the word software, and they just took them and put them together. It's kind of a terrible name. Like Microsoft, like it's kind of a stupid name actually, and a pretty lazy name, right? It's like it's nothing special, it's nothing fancy. No branding team came up with it, and for many years it was actually two words for a long time. It was kind of separated, and it's kind of a silly name, but you don't think of it that way. I say Microsoft, and you have this whole world of experiences in your brain that, maybe they're positive, maybe they're negative. I mean, for me, they're very positive, but that name is kind of carries with it this weight of experiences that you don't dissect the name anymore. Microsoft has become a very different thing for you when I say that. And so I think that for any brand, the brand has to be concerned about the experiences that they're delivering, and they have to make sure that those experiences are rolling up to the brand image that you want to have. And it's hard to imagine a brand wanting to have bad customer experiences, but you may want to have a particular type of experience. The way your agents answer the phone may be different. Maybe it's like, hey, dude, how's it going? Like very relaxed, maybe kind of hippie-ish, or maybe it's very formal. Hello, sir, welcome to so there's all sorts of like tonality changes that you may want to implement. And thinking about sort of the tonality, the way you land it, the way you want to like, all that is your brand, because the brand is the sum total of experiences you have. So cool question. Maybe I'll build that into the next deck because I like the way we're going about that. And by the way, I just want to say all these questions, like amazing, like great questions, really love them. And you've got me thinking in some new ways, and I really appreciate the feedback. It's really excellent.
Sure. Thank you so much, Brad. I think we all got to learn a lot, and it was really nice talking to you. Thank you for coming in between the chaos and addressing this. And thank you everybody for joining in and everybody who facilitated this. Thank you.
Have a great day.